Hello, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. I'm so pleased today to be here with author Stephanie Dray, who is the co-author of America's First Daughter, an amazing book based upon the life of the daughter of Thomas Jefferson.
That's right.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here to talk about Patsy Jefferson. What an amazing woman she was.
So tell me, how did you come about thinking about writing a book about Thomas Jefferson's daughter?
Well, most of the books that I've written prior have been set in ancient Rome. I've always wanted to write in the Revolution, but I was nervous about making that transition.
That's a big transition from Rome
to
sure colonial America.
So I was very fortunate to have my very good friend, Laura Kamoie, who at the time was a professor of history at the U.S. Naval Academy, teaching seminars on Thomas Jefferson. And I sort of told her how I'd always wanted to write a book in this period, and she wanted to write one too. But we wondered, we both admired Thomas Jefferson, but there's been so much written about him. And so we thought, how could we ever write something that hasn't been covered before? We thought, well, a lot has been written about him as a founding father, but not very much has been written about him as a father. And so we were delighted to make that sort of breakthrough, and we raced back to my hotel room that night, and we researched till about 4 a.m. and decided on the spot that we were writing this book.
Well, to me, it just was very charming because although it's based on the truth, it is still fiction, so you get very close to the character, Patsy. Her real name was Martha Jefferson, is that correct?
That's right. That was also her mother's name, but her childhood nickname was Patsy, so we used that to distinguish her.
Well, I can see the research that went into the book, and a little birdie told me you went through 18,000 documents written by Jefferson and another 1,500 by Patsy and other family members?
I'm not sure we kept a total count of all the other letters, but yeah, there are 18,000 digitized letters available from the National Archives, which is a wonderful resource for all Americans. And we explored those and used many of those letters in the book itself.
Well, it's quite an undertaking, but the authenticity really rings through. You really feel that you're in that time period and seeing things through Patsy's eyes.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about how Patsy dealt with things such as being in France and Sally Hemings.
Well, there is no record, actually, of how she dealt with Sally Hemings, who was an enslaved woman at Monticello, who was her mother's half-sister. And Jefferson had inherited the Hemmings family along with other slaves from John Wales, his father-in-law. The relationship between Jefferson and Sally Hemings was thought to have become sexual in nature while he was ambassador to France, which was a scandal in his time as it is now. And so it is our belief that his daughter made sure to keep that a secret during his lifetime and hers, and for about 200 years. So I guess our contention is that her way of dealing with it was denial, flat out denial.
Now, Jefferson was a bachelor in the White House, and I know that Patsy was his hostess at a certain point, but so was Dolly Madison. Why did he have two hostesses instead of just using Patsy alone?
Jefferson was a widower. His wife died when Patsy was only 9. And by the time he became president, there really wasn't a role of First Lady per se. That was a role that really was sort of invented by Dolly Madison, who was the wife of his Secretary of State, James Madison. But he also relied on his daughter, especially after the Sally Hemings scandal broke in his second term of his presidency. He needed his daughters to sort of be at his side. And Patsy and her sister Polly came to Washington City, as it was known then, to support their father, and Patsy was his hostess in Washington, D.C. She hosted so many dinners, it was astonishing. One the day before she gave birth in the White House, and one the day after she gave birth.
Wow, that's really sticking by your man
Isn't
and your
that
father.
Hardcore? Yes.
It sure is. Now, she had a bit of a moment of herself, trying to decide about whom she was going to marry. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the historical Patsy, we know, was highly sought after by young men and even nobles in France. She came back with her father, which we took as an important choice. And in our research, we discovered that she may have had a flirtation with her, well, she did have a flirtation with her father's secretary, William Short. How intense that relationship really was, we weren't sure, but when we looked at all the evidence, a very good case could be made that they were in love and that she chose to leave him behind in France to return and be at her father's side.
And didn't she have to make a choice between her own philosophy, between being an abolitionist or being with her father, who was a known slaveholder?
Well, Jefferson was a slaveholder. He was also against slavery. He wrote about it. He tried to legislate against it. He was never able to disentangle himself from the institution, much to his shame. His daughter also has made some utterances historically that show that she felt the same way. William Short, however, managed to build a life outside of Virginia without slavery. And he was actually one of America's first millionaires. So she, in terms of family wealth, she chose poorly. But she, chose to go back to Virginia in a way of life that was enmeshed with the institution of slavery. And that was something that the whole Jefferson family struggled with all of Patsy's life and past her father's death.
Well, it's amazing being here, hearing about this. I'm looking forward to your next book, which is on Hamilton. That's why we have Hamilton here.
Right.
And we have, if you can see, our little bobbleheads, Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton. But it's just amazing that this is going to be coming out, you said, in July. What's the name of the new book?
Oh, the new book is tentatively titled My Dear Hamilton and will be out in 2018.
And it'll be about another presidential daughter, right?
Well, this will be about Hamilton's wife, Eliza Schuyler Hamilton.
Well, I'm so looking forward to reading it. Thank you so much for being here with us. And this has been another episode of Booksmart. I'm your host, Diana Belchase, here with Stephanie Dray. And keep reading.